Hi, Katie, John, and Demetra. Thank you for attending.
Hello, everybody.
And if you don't know, this is being recorded. So I just want to let everybody know that. I'm going to have the attendees keep their video off until we get to the question part of the forum.
So I'll start the video identification or whatever she called it, description of it. Hi, everybody. My name is Walter Harris. I'm wearing a black shirt and a red tie. I'm a volunteer for Western PA Participatory Defense Hub. Western PA Participatory Defense is part of a national network. Participatory defense is a community organizing model for people facing charges, their families, and communities to impact the outcomes of cases and transform the landscape of power in the court system. I'm also a volunteer for Abolition Law Center Court Watch program. Volunteers of the ALC Court Watch produce a steady flow of information and reports to be shared with the public, policymakers, activists, and legal professionals across Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. We observe and evaluate the justice system for trends and patterns that inform and illuminate the problems of overpopulation and damning demographics of mass incarceration. The reports we supply include data such as charging decisions, bail, probation, and stipulations, services, demographics, as well as the general disposition of the courts. We are in service to our communities, making the workings and ongoings of the courtroom accessible to the public. In this way, publishing our findings holds the justice system accountable to the needs of the communities. We hope to impact policy away from the evils of mass incarceration, starting with the overpopulation of the Allegheny County Jail. Similar to sit-ins of the modern civil rights era, by placing our bodies in a space normally occupied only by consumers of the court, we are staging an act of protest to disrupt the current status quo and demand change away from the current penal form of prosecution. It is time for a more just system that uplifts the community and promotes healing. I'm Walter Harris.
Thank you, Walter. And, for anybody that's interested in learning more or getting more involved, feel free to reach out to us at admin@courtwatch.org, or you can reach out to us on Instagram at ALC Courtwatch, which I will put in the chat for anybody interested. Ooh, how did I get muted? Did everybody hear that? Did I get the contact information out? Great. So I'm going to kind of jump in to let the candidates introduce themselves. But before that, I wanted to post their names as well as their websites that they've made for their candidacy in the chat. So anybody interested to go to those websites and learn more about the candidates and what they've already put online, feel free to do that. And with no further ado, I'm going to let Rachel Rosnick start by introducing herself.
Is this our 5 to 7 minute intro?
This is that.
Okay. So my name is Rachel Rosnick. I am a white woman with brown, red, curly hair to my shoulders, wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt. My background behind me is a green wall with like a wicker egg type chair. I'm running for magistrate in the East End. I have lived in Bloomfield for the past 17 years. I'm a 3-time University of Pittsburgh graduate. I did my undergrad in sociology and political science. Then I took a year off and did AmeriCorps. Came back for law school. About a year into law school, decided I wanted to do the joint master's degree program with GSBIA. So while I was working on my law degree, I was also working on a master's in public and international affairs. I did my thesis on the government surveillance and targeting of activists. I'm currently the board secretary at Right Pittsburgh and Dreams of Hope. I was one of the attorneys for Occupy Pittsburgh, and I spent a long time as operations director at Girls Rock Pittsburgh. I've previously advised and represented activists participating in various local and regional demonstrations while serving as regional vice president of the National Lawyers Guild. I've spent the past several years representing at-risk juveniles and young adults at magistrate hearings in an effort to disrupt both the school to prison pipeline as well as the foster care to prison pipeline. I've never been involved in electoral politics before, but I was compelled to run for this position due to what I see occurring at magistrate offices nearly every day, especially the collateral consequences of a summary citation. About 75% of all cases filed at the magistrate level are summary citations, which include traffic offenses, disorderly conduct, truancy, underage drinking, that kind of thing. They're generally punishable by a fine, which after court costs is about $450. A significant amount of my juvenile clients get their citations while they're at school. So when a kid's cited at school, they're generally also suspended, sometimes expelled at the same time, which leads to them being punished twice for the same incident. It is a huge waste of resources, and it doesn't let the kid move on. It just keeps punishing them. Often these summary hearings are held months after the incident has blown over, and it just serves to re-inflame tensions between teenagers. Often my clients have emotional or behavioral support, IEPs, and the behavior that they're cited for is related to those needs. So sometimes instead of rather being provided the additional support they require, they're cited for their behavior. This happens even when the behavior is sometimes found to be a clear manifestation of their disability, meaning there was a hearing with the school regarding a suspension. It was determined that the school was legally not allowed to suspend the child for their behavior based on its connection to their disability. So the kid can't be suspended, but they can be arrested and they can be cited. It doesn't make any sense at all. And these are adult charges. There's no substantive difference in process or punishment. It's still up to a $450 fine after court costs. And if the kid doesn't pay, it can be certified to juvenile court. So now they've got a delinquency record or a bench warrant can be issued. And then now they have that additional fee as well. The kicker here is that often the students are cited for annoying, juvenile, dumb, just teenage behavior, that it's not criminal. I've seen citations written for relatively normal teenage behavior, stuff like refusing to get off their phone, wandering the hallways, cussing, insubordination, stuff that teenagers do. And I'm sure it drives educators up a wall, but it's not criminal, and a criminal citation isn't the appropriate response. At summary proceedings, the right to an attorney generally doesn't attach, and prosecution is handled by the arresting officer, not a district attorney. So this leads itself to a courtroom where there's a cavalier attitude towards the law itself. Proceedings are regularly permitted to move forward despite elements of the crime not being met. The accused's right to not testify against themselves is pretty much never acknowledged. Ex parte communications between law enforcement officers, school officials, magistrates, that's really common. The burden of proof is regularly shifted to the defendant to prove they didn't do whatever they've been accused of or to explain themselves, despite the fact that the law puts the burden on the prosecution to prove their guilt beyond reasonable doubt. So my experience as a lawyer who spent the past few years handling a lot of these school-based summary citations and treating them with the seriousness they deserve is going to allow me to follow the actual law, make sure the rules of procedure are followed, and ensure that everyone's rights are protected. Another big thing I've been dealing with over the past few years that I want to focus on is the particularly damaging collateral consequences of not being able to pay a traffic fine. So you're pulled over for speeding, or you run a red light, or your taillight's out, or you don't signal when you're turning, and you're either found guilty or you plead guilty to that. Again, you're fined. And then if you can't afford to pay that fine, which a lot of people can't, and you miss a payment, that bench warrant is issued. That's an additional constable fee, which is anywhere from like $30 to $50. If you're on a payment plan, that has to be paid before payments are applied to the next month. So you're starting that next month out in the hole, which makes it more likely that that's late as well. Then, since it's a traffic offense, PennDOT gets involved too. So they're notified your license is suspended. If you're pulled over before you pay the nearly $100 license restoration fee, you're hit with additional charges for driving on a suspended license. Then there's additional court dates, additional fines, additional opportunities to get caught up in the cycle. It snowballs and it traps people in this endless cycle of poverty and system involvement. None of it's necessary. Fines and fees can be waived for those without financial resources. For non-traffic offenses, judges can assign community service or other alternatives instead of levying fines in the first place. The court can schedule payment determination hearings when a payment's missed rather than assuming bad faith. There's a lot of options here, and I think we're all creative enough to come up with solutions for any different type of scenario that would arise. Previous magistrate candidates have done a really wonderful job at heightening our collective awareness of the problems with cash bail evictions. I would like the opportunity to extend our collective thinking on how the courts often punish people simply for being poor, to include the fines and fees associated with summary offenses, because all of this is related, it's incredibly important, and it affects a lot of people.
Thank you, Rachel. That was excellent. And next, we're going to bring up Philip Roberts.
Thanks, Chris and Walter. It's really great to be here tonight. So I am running for Magisterial District Judge in this district, along with Rachel, Kate, and Casey. This, for me, starts years ago. I've often been saying, as I'm going around in the community, this is not a position that I'm running for born from an opportunity. This is a position I'm running for because it's been my dream job. This is what I've been working towards for years. And for me, that starts with my upbringing. I grew up in this community, in this district, right on North Negley. I had the opportunity to be a proud product of the Pittsburgh Public School District. I was a graduate of Schenley High School, where I participated in the International Baccalaureate program. After Schenley, I went to Seton Hill University and achieved my Bachelor's of Science, and then went on after working for a brief stint for the Pittsburgh Pirates, which is now something we can be proud of currently for a little bit at least. Worked in the Pirates front office for a little while, and then went to Michigan State for law school, where I achieved my law degree. That's where this starts for me, and where that dream of serving the community that raised me and that I grew up in was born. I was in Michigan. I became a certified facilitative mediator. That allowed me to then go in and actually mediate cases using facilitative mediation principles that focused on restorative justice. And I mediated cases for 3 magisterial or equivalent to magisterial district courts that the state of Michigan offer. Those cases range from housing disputes to small claims disputes. And it was an amazing opportunity. I was given, the position where we were taking individuals that normally would have went through an adversarial process in the court systems in the state of Michigan. We were taking them out of that traditional process and giving them a platform to not only participate and collaborate for potential resolution, but also the principles of facilitative mediation focus on allowing individuals to be heard, validated, understood, looking for interest behind positions within the conflict. The mediation center that was a part of the court actually tracked the data as far as further need for court involvement from these types of cases that chose to go through mediation process. And it dropped almost by 50% for need for further court involvement. And that was not tied to mediation cases that were achieved resolution. That was just by itself. A lot of the cases that I worked on, resolutions weren't able to be met, but you could see the actual healing of conflict taking place in the parties when they were able to be heard and understood and feel like they were actually listened on the other side of the aisle. So that became my passion. I wanted to come back to my community and serve. I wanted to give back to my community through serving as a magisterial district judge. When I got back, I quickly realized that a magisterial district judge for Allegheny County handles a wide range of law. Magisterial district judges handle things from housing court, dealing with landlord-tenant law, livable housing condition petitions. They do all our criminal preliminary hearings. They handle small claims court, which deals with civil litigation for cases under $10,000 being sought. And we also have our truancy cases, which Rachel went in depth to a degree on what those are made up of. A lot of the times it's citations for habitual misattendance, and then there's also summary offenses that can pile on that has been discussed already. And so there's 4 really different areas of law there. And so that's what I focused on. I focused on how do I become the most well-rounded and qualified candidate that I can make myself into to properly serve our community. And that's what I focused on. I've done work in family division. I've done, I clerked for the Honorable Dan Regan in Family Division, where we participated in a crossover docket, which means that we actually worked on cases stemming from juvenile dependency. We worked on cases of adult custody. We worked on cases of divorce and equitable distribution. We worked on cases of support, both spousal and child, and we worked on protection from abuse cases. So I participated in almost every level of the family system, and also got judicial experience where I was allowed to conciliate part of the docket for adult custody cases, both in pro se litigants where individuals were unrepresented by attorneys in family division, as well as with attorneys. And I was able to conduct those conciliations on adult custody cases. And it was an unbelievable experience that I thought was really equivalent to the mediation work that I was able to do in Michigan. And I saw some of the same restorative principles taking place in family division when we were conducting those proceedings. I've also done civil litigation. I've practiced at a private defense firm downtown, Walsh, Barnes and Zampella. I've also done civil litigation in my current job. I currently work for the Allegheny County Law Department. I'm an assistant solicitor there. I do civil litigation for the county, as well as I work with mental health court. I currently work with 3 different hospitals, the doctors, the social workers. I deal heavily with the Mental Health Procedures Act. All of that is under my purview as well. The hospitals I work with are St. Clair Hospital, Heritage Valley, and Western Psych. I work on those cases at least once a week. I'm also the direct assigned municipal attorney to the Economic Development Agency at the county right now, along with another colleague. And I also work for the Department of Human Services, where we focus on child line investigations and then child line founded expunction proceedings that stem from founded child lines. And so I wear a lot of different hats for the county. I also have done housing work, both professionally and personally. So I've represented and assisted tenants in housing actions, but I've also then, I've been in my personal life heavily involved with Open Hand Housing Ministries, which is a nonprofit in the East End that focuses on providing housing opportunities to marginalized sections of the community, specifically our Black and Brown community in the East End, in this district, that have often been victim to gentrification in areas such as East Liberty, even going further back, Highland Park, as well as Garfield now, and Lincoln, Leamington, Larimer, Homewood. And so the nonprofit, I serve on the board and provide legal counsel in situations that they request my counsel on. And so then that was all 4. So and that's really comes down to why I'm running. It's just, I want to give back to the community. And I believe that since this has been a passion of mine for some time, I really feel passionately that I have a lot of progressive reforms that will make substantial impact in the community to achieve progress. I hope to get into those with some of the further questions. I don't want to take too much time, but they're really focused on accessibility, getting accessibility of the court opened up to the community, offering a resource. That court should be a resource to our community. We can offer educational series from that court, as well as criminal justice reform, reforming the municipal court system as it exists, which is failing not just our district, but the city right now.
Thank you, Philip Roberts. Next up, we have Kate Lovelace. Hi, Kate.
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm Kate Lovelace. I am from Highland Park. I am married. I have twins, Walter and Betty Lou. I was a public defender for a while. That was sort of my heart and soul. When I went to law school, I thought I would do children's law or policy work, but I fell in love with public defense and I did it, and it's still in my heart. And through that, I saw lots and lots of just every single kind of case, and through all the magistrates, and I did a lot of since I'll just continue. Okay. So since I've left the public defender's office and in that continued practice, I've done a lot of, and including the public defender's psychiatric work, juvenile work. By psychiatric, I mean like I'm sort of on the opposite side of what Phil does most of the time. I'm usually fighting for my clients not to be childlined, not to be institutionalized, not to be incarcerated. And so that's always kind of been my position. I think that these populations are the most over-policed and the most subject to intergenerational poverty and intergenerational trauma and getting caught up on these fines and these fees. But more importantly, just because people don't like behavior doesn't make it criminal. It doesn't even make it summary. So yes, I do think that sometimes we all have to come to court and talk about it, but people can be found not guilty in summary court all the time. I get not guilty verdicts for clients. So people should have more hearings at their magistrate level. And magistrates right now are very often afraid to say no to police officers or district attorneys because they don't want to be like the one that let this family get away or this person get away. But you still have a burden to prove at that level. And I often find the Commonwealth is not even attempting to establish it. And some cases need to go downtown for sure. Lots of cases need to go downtown, but we are sending things downtown without intent all the time because we don't like the behavior. We don't like the way someone walks. We don't like the way that they present to us. They didn't act the way we wanted them to act when they were in front of us because they've suffered an injustice. And it goes for traffic cases, criminal cases, all the cases that come before magistrates. And I really, really think that if people felt like they could come to their magistrate and have their say and have their hearing or their trial or whatever they're there for, then the officers and the school resource officers and the UPMC police and all these people would stop wasting their time on crappy non-intent summaries and criminal offenses because they would feel like they're not going to get home to their kids that night. Because right now people just speed them through the system and it's a processing and people just go through it and they pay their fines and they put their head down and they say, just give me the lowest fine I can have. And like Rachel said, it spins out of control. People miss a fine and that could be their rent money. Then they're going to get evicted. My clients, I started a clinic for clients that do have CYF involvement and criminal involvement at the same time, and they have to fight multiple systems. So we do lots of things for them. We do PFAs, we do school law for them, we do truancy cases. And I've had landlords that just have horrible housing for my clients. And if they don't provide better housing, then they get CYF activity and then they get criminal charges and it all cycles into a big thing. Getting your fingerprints before you have to have your preliminary hearing means you might have to go downtown at 10 o'clock on a Friday night without your kids and be on time for 3 minutes so they can have access to your fingerprints. So there are just lots and lots of system burdens that people that come through the magistrate are facing. And often people are saying, well, we can divert them with community service and this and that. And sometimes we can, and sometimes people don't even need that. They just don't need to have some kind of punishment or consequence because they didn't really do anything wrong. So I find that, and I also find that sometimes when we ask our client, well, when people ask my clients to do more things at the magistrate, it's just another thing that they have to do to prove that they can comply with somebody else's behavior. And if you can't comply because you don't have transportation or your kid is sick that day, then you get kicked out of that program and start all over, and that's not compliance. That might mean your case got waived downtown. So there's lots and lots of complexities. There's lots of different kinds of probation detainers. There are types of bonds, there are different types of holds, there are psychiatric holds, and all of those things lead to over incarceration if you don't understand them. And even though, yes, you have to put a little bit of a cash bail on somebody who's being detained, it can be $100. It doesn't have to be $5,000. There's so many different semantics to how these things happen. And it's not just when people get pulled over for traffic signals, they do get violated for other things. I mean, they could have somebody in their car who has a gun on them and everybody in the car is going back to jail because everybody was on probation. This is what's leading to the problems with the jail. This is why people are dying in the jail. So that's mostly my platform. That's mostly what I'm running on, but I do have a lot of experience working with juveniles and children with disabilities and intellectuals with disabilities and autism. And so I would like to see some more compassion and room for that and more training and experience for magistrates in that area to start working on disrupting some of the school to prison and street to prison pipeline that we're seeing. Magistrates are being used often as a tax court. We're taxing our communities to pay for the jail because nobody wants to pay for the jail. So you can find out a lot about me. I talk all the time. I've done podcasts about this stuff. It's on my website. So check it out.
Thank you, Kate. You were so well spoken there. I didn't have time to unmute myself. And finally, we have Casey Mullen. Hi, Casey.
Hello, how are you? I thank you for having us. My name is Casey Mullen. I am light complected, white male with really, really short hair, shorter than I like it, sitting in front of a gray wall. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in the 10th Ward section of Lawrenceville. I come from a very, very good family. I had every opportunity in life. It was a blue collar working class community, but I was surrounded by really good people. Unfortunately, like so many of my peers at a young age, it was kind of a rite of passage in the community that we began engaging in alcohol use and drug use. And unfortunately, so many of us, myself included, ended up addicted to drugs. At 19 years old, I was caught in the mass incarceration of the 90s for nonviolent drug offenses. I was charged with 2 deliveries of powder cocaine. It was my first and only arrest. I sat in a county jail. I waited for bail. Fortunately, my family had a piece of property and I was able to get out, and I was on bail for 18 months before I went to trial. At trial, I was convicted and sentenced to serve a 3 to 10 year sentence in a state prison system. I thought my life ended. I didn't know anybody who ever went to prison and came out and did anything meaningful. Every man I knew that went to prison got caught in that cycle that my fellow candidates were talking about of release, violation, reincarceration, release, violation, reincarceration, maybe new charge. Fortunately, while in jail, I was able to positively address the underlying cause of my conduct, which was my addiction. And upon my release, I was determined to rebuild my life. I didn't realize walking out that door that just because they let you go home doesn't mean you stop doing time. I had 7 years of parole, and everything I tried to do, I was told no. I was eventually able to get back into a university. I completed an undergraduate degree and decided that I wanted to go to law school. I had to make application to law school 4 times before they would admit me. When they finally did, I excelled, not because I'm more intelligent than anybody else. I was just more grateful for the opportunity than most of my peers. I graduated from law school, passed the bar, and struggled to gain employment just because of my past. It was still haunting me at that point in time, 17 years later. I, like Phil, have an eclectic background legally. I initially started with a small litigation firm where I did a lot of family law, a lot of custody, a lot of divorces, a lot of PFAs. And then finally, I met a guy who gave me an opportunity to go work at a big firm. I went and practiced civil defense for 5 months. I successfully represented a bank, not because I'm a super lawyer, probably because the bank wrote the statutes, and I took a man's home, and driving back from court in another county, I had an existential crisis. So I can't do this anymore. I can't represent banks and insurance companies. They deserve representation, just not me. That day I told the managing partner I was done, and I started my own practice that I had since 2015, where I represent individuals with problems. The bulk of my practice is criminal defense, which affords me the opportunity to appear before magistrates every day, almost every day, not just in Allegheny County, but in Beaver and Butler and Washington, Fayette, and I get to see what works and what doesn't work. And what I witnessed most of the time is a mad rush to clear a docket. Magistrates don't seem to care about necessarily getting it right, because the belief seems to be that it will be resolved by a judge in common pleas. We'll just move it along. And I don't think that that's fair. It's not fair to the individuals. It's not fair to the litigants. It's not fair to my client, who is the accused. When the consequences of a conviction, a consequence of even being on bail, is severe. I was in front of a magistrate the other day who, it was the 4th listing, and he gave the Commonwealth one more chance. And it's been days and I'm still mad about it, but that it just doesn't seem just. I am seeking this position because my heart is actually in it. This is exactly what I want to do. I believe that I have been on a journey for years to put me exactly where I am, exactly where I need to be to have the professional and personal experiences to not only do this job, but to do this job extremely well, to understand the totality of the circumstances that are taking place in the courtroom, and understand the consequences, and both good and bad, to those in the courtroom. I agree that some cases need to be held. Some cases need to go downtown. But I also agree that many of the cases that appear can be worked out there. Many of the cases that appear can be mitigated there, because it's in the best interest of everybody. I have the opportunity, due to my past, to do some volunteer work in the state prison system, where I go in and participate in a program with the inmates who are going to be released in the next 18 months. And we try to focus on the hurdles that they'll face, the challenges they'll face, what they can do while incarcerated to increase the likelihood that upon their release, they can remain free and they can become absorbed back into the mainstream of society. And since COVID, in the last couple of months, I've been in 4 different state penitentiaries that are all under capacity. And to be honest, every time I leave, I'm scared. Because for those of us who got caught up in that wave of, in the 90s, of the solution to every social plight was just incarcerate, lock them up. It scares me when they're under capacity, because I often wonder, you know, what are we going to do to fill these things up? Like, what changes are going to be made to keep feeding this animal that we created? And it is scary. I often wonder if, you know, parole is going to stop paroling people, if violations are going to increase the numbers. And it's a real concern of mine when I leave. And I firmly believe that when I'm there and I deal with the men or women, I have gone to the female prison as well, that everybody walks out with the noble intention of staying out. And I just think they need some help in order to do that. So I'm fortunate to have some experience, that I have something to offer these individuals. And when I go in, so far it has been positive, and hopefully positive for them. I think it's imperative that we have people on the court who fully understand the challenges, the obstacles. And everybody says, and I'm sure my fellow candidates get the same response from people, it's such a great job. If you win, it's such a great job. And I don't know that it's such a great job. I think it's a very, very challenging job. I think if you seek this position and you desire to do this job well, and use this position to do well, I think it's really challenging. It's challenging to make difficult decisions every day that are in the best interest of those before you and society as a whole. And it's, to me, I'm not seeking this position because I'm looking for a retirement or looking for some easy position. I am seeking this position because I believe in my heart that I am the right person to do it, and that I'm more than capable of making those challenging decisions correctly most of the time. And no one's going to get it right. No one's going to get it right all the time. And,
Thank you, Casey.
Oh, I apologize.
All good, all good. So Moving on to the next part of this is we have some prepared questions. So I'm going to bring all the candidates up to answer some questions for us. And then after this, we're going to open it up to the rest of the audience, and you're going to have some time to ask whatever questions you have to the candidates as well. So the first question I asked, and I'll kind of chime in and give you guys a little 60 seconds heads up to the answer. I want to keep all these answers at 5 minutes or less, so we don't take too much time in any one question. And I'll do that online, so you'll hear me say it. Everybody will hear me say it. And the first question is, what is justice, and what is your judicial philosophy? I'll also put it in chat too, so whoever's not answering first will still have be able to see it. And I'm going to go in the same order we did the introductions. So Rachel, we'll go ahead and start with you. What is justice, and what is your judicial philosophy?
Okay, so justice is making sure that everyone has what they need to live a fulfilling, healthy, and meaningful life without systemic or structural barriers. It's important because when everyone isn't provided or able to access what they need to thrive as individuals, any system that we create on top of that is going to be tainted by those inequities and lack of resources. I don't think justice is something that we're ever going to fully achieve. It's something that you constantly strive for, and it's probably not something that's ever going to be agreed upon either. My judicial philosophy is based in harm reduction. I think that court proceedings should attempt to restore all parties without causing further harm, without exacerbating existing tensions or becoming a source of further injustice.
Thank you, Rachel. Philip?
Thank you. So I believe justice is about fairness and restoration of all who come in contact with the court, right? And so to me, that means everybody. That means individuals that come into the court for a housing dispute. That means individuals that come in for a small claims dispute. That means defendants and that come before the court on criminal proceedings. That includes victims in criminal proceedings. Everyone that the court has an opportunity to touch and impact, the goal should be restoration and restoration of individuals' lives. And as Rachel put right, individuals' lives that often are affected by systemic issues. And so seeing those systemic issues, I like to also kind of always make a point that fairness doesn't always mean everyone gets treated the exact same way. I really believe fairness means listening and understanding what each individual has gone through. And often you have to understand the system that they've been through and that they're currently involved with, because that will be different from another individual and what they've gone through. And so it's about giving people the opportunity for restoration. And that's ultimately how we take strides as a community. So that would also be along the lines of my judicial philosophy, right? It's approaching people with compassion, approaching the community with compassion, and looking at how do we create a restorative court for the community to utilize and access. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Philip. Kate?
Thanks. So I think that justice is elastic, and I think that what people think justice is can change quite a bit depending on how far they go in the system, what they know about the system, and what is being offered to them that day. So, justice can often be, I have clients who say, you call me all the time, I'd rather you be my lawyer. I might not win your case. Like Casey might be the best lawyer who would win your case and never call you back. I'm not saying Casey doesn't call his clients back. I'm sure he calls us. I'll use a different example. But save your case. And it doesn't matter. It's what you want. Clients, people who are coming before a magistrate, whether they're landlords, tenants, defendants, students, usually want to be heard, and their idea of what justice is changes as they start to hear other stories, as they start to understand the law. And sometimes it's just about, I need to be heard. And part of implementing justice is trying to find the least harmful consequences but everybody might have to suffer a little bit, or not everybody's going to be happy with the outcome. I think that what it's not is getting mad at people like because they were rude to you when they came in, or they wore shorts, or they're 20 minutes late. Like, people have hard lives and they have hard decisions to make. And I was in city court yesterday and this UPMC cop searched my client's bag, which seems illegal, but said, I want her to take a drug test for me. Like, no, absolutely not. And that's the idea that office, like, justice needs to be that there's a district attorney there to say no with me. And officers have a lot of leniency in criminal matters at magistrate courts, and that isn't justice. And people being 11% of people being in jail for less than 2 days is not justice. That's a lot of cash bail that we're still using. I mean, that's almost everybody who's not being detained or waiting for state prison is basically being still cash bail for less than 2 days. So I think justice is giving people an opportunity to be heard. And I think that their idea of justice changes a lot, but trying to be fair and equitable and cause the least harm to as many people as possible.
Thank you, Kate. And Casey, you want to finish it up?
Yes, thanks. Justice goes hand in hand with fairness, and ultimately it's to promote and do what is just, which I agree may not be as black and white as we would always like it to be. Our system's designed to promote justice, but it doesn't. Justice doesn't naturally spring from it. It's an ideal that must be worked for daily. And it takes a commitment of everybody involved. Advocates like we are right now advocate for justice for our clients all the time. And I think the court needs to be on board too, to promote what is just, to promote what is right, what is, and again, it's not always black and white. Justice is that, the consequences of an act are appropriate for that act. Not, I'm going to give them max fine no matter what, because that's what I do. And that's not justice. So justice is that thing that absolutely has to be an ideal every time we walk in a courtroom. And I can say this without in any way diminishing myself. Like, there's 4 good attorneys sitting here that we walk in and we advocate for our clients and we fight for what we believe is just. And I think it's imperative that the court also recognizes what justice is. In order to do that, I think the court, me personally, I have to recognize and try to see things from positions that I don't necessarily always look at things. I have to put aside my own bias, my own experience, a whole bunch of, so I can see the totality of the circumstances. And my judicial philosophy is just that, to promote what is just, to promote what is fair, to make certain that everybody feels they're heard, that no one walks out of the courtroom, they'll walk out disappointed. It's inevitable, it happens every day, but at least they feel like in that courtroom, I was heard and I got a fair hearing. And I think that's what our system is designed to do. However, it doesn't happen by itself.
Thank you, Casey. Great answers from everyone. Moving right to our next question. It is, what injustices have you witnessed in or outside the courtroom? And what was your response to those events? Go ahead, Rachel, kick us off.
My first hand. So this one's a little hard for me to answer because the things that have the cases that have bothered me the most have been juvenile cases in closed courtrooms. Public's not allowed in for summary citations, juveniles, closed courtroom. And they're in suburban magistrate offices where even if it was an adult, no one's court watching out in the suburbs, really. Like at municipal court, there's an audience, the proceedings are public. At these suburban magistrates, everybody's in the waiting room and they're calling you back one by one. There's no one really watching. But in general terms, the most harmful thing I've seen over the past few years is magistrates kind of going outside of their role as a judge and asking really invasive questions to my clients about their families, their things in their personal lives, making assumptions about them, and yelling at times about things unrelated to the case, just like really, really out of line invasive questioning and just comments. And it's hard to respond because you want to avoid your client being found guilty, but you also need to be the adult in the room to stand up for them. So I try to interject, like, this doesn't have anything to do with this. Can we talk about the case? Like, it's not relevant. Like, we're not here we're not here to ask questions about the family. We're not here to talk about their grades or whatever unrelated thing. We just, whatever. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the most you can do is try to win the case. If you can't, you take the appeal. And then afterwards, going out to the parking lot, talking with the client, validating that those things that judge said to you, they weren't right. That wasn't the right thing to happen. Listening to them, validating how they feel about what happened, and then letting them know that you're going to take the appropriate steps to rectify the situation. You're going to file the appeal. Maybe we can file a complaint. Maybe we can talk to somebody else. We're going to do what we can to undo that. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. Philip?
Thanks. Yeah, I think all four of us as attorneys probably see small injustices and large injustices almost on a daily basis in our work. You know, and for me, in a lot of my different areas of work, right, whether it was family or criminal or civil litigation, even as well as just even in mediating cases back in Michigan, no matter what it was, and I think this has been discussed even previously, Kate had mentioned, right, a lot of the injustices, I think, from how people are feeling those injustices come from a lack of being heard, which ultimately leads to a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge. And that's what I see the most on a regular basis. And that goes in any area of the law that you're dealing with, whether it be civil, criminal, family, juvenile. There's so much of a lack of individuals that are coming into contact with our legal and justice system and leaving feeling like they were not given an opportunity to be heard, understood, or explained anything. And so that's what I try to, do my part as an attorney in Allegheny County right now and in the state of Pennsylvania. And before that, when I was in Michigan, it's always for me been, how do I make sure that whoever I'm coming into contact with, whether that be a criminal alleged defendant, a convicted defendant, a victim, someone who's facing a housing dispute, a landlord, no matter who it is, how do I make sure that someone is feeling heard and understood, and they have an opportunity to ask questions, to be informed, and for restoration to take place, because that can't happen if we aren't listening to individuals.
Thank you, Philip. Kate?
I don't know how I could have possibly answered this question in the amount of time allotted. Every single case I have, even if they did the crime and I know they did it, somehow feels like I'm witnessing an injustice. On some level, there is an injustice happening. I'm just like, a million clients are running through my head. The expectations, I've seen doctors have my clients arrested because they childline. I've just seen the most insane things. I've seen crazy injustices. I'm not saying school police aren't necessary. We can't have kids coming to schools with guns, but we don't have to bring kids to court. And if it's not criminal, you definitely don't need to bring it to court. It's just juvenile behavior. If we don't have Schumann and we're housing kids in jail, then, then they should be able to post bond like an adult. If they're going to be treated like juveniles, then they need to be in a place like Schumann. I see injustices all the time. I've seen parents come to court and say, I don't want this kid anymore. I've seen judges say, you're going to jail for a week because I don't like the way the lawyers talk to me. I used to get kicked out of courtrooms all the time, truly, in common pleas court. That's why I try not to practice there very often, because I used to say this is so wrong. And I've learned to tone it down quite a bit. I still pretty feisty. I still don't give up very quickly. I just last week was in Washington County, and the officers told my client, after charging him with intent to distribute and all kinds of victim-oriented crimes, they would only make him plead to the disorderly conduct, just plead to the disorderly conduct. And I was like, for what? For being disorderly when he was in the back of your police car after being wrongfully accused and arrested and detained for not having drugs that you charged him with a felony for? I mean, I would feel pretty disorderly. Well, he was calling us racist, and I'm looking at him and them and the witnesses and thinking, yeah. And they withdrew it. So, you know, you can fight, just fight harder, make people know that you will be the problem. I mean, that's how I've made myself part of the system. Injustice is my MO. I love it. I love fighting it. I don't love injustice. I love fighting injustice. It's like my religion. It feels like service to me. I love standing up to people. I think people should come stand up to me. I think people would walk in. I think most lawyers or people would walk into a courtroom and be like, oh, I have a chance today. I'm going to tell my side. So that's my spiel on that.
Thank you so much, Kate. And finally, Casey.
Yeah, like Kate, you know, if you're in courtrooms every day, I think that every day you probably see small things. Earlier I said about, you know, a magistrate granting the Commonwealth a continuance after the 4th listing. That to me is a small injustice. The greatest injustice that I personally dealt with is a man in 1985 was pled guilty to 5 separate heroin deliveries that totaled $360. His daily routine to support his habit was he would stand on the edge of the Hill District and take white people's money, run up into the Hill District, get them their drugs and bring it back because they didn't want to go up there themselves because being seen would bring attention to them. He had 5 separate deliveries to undercover police officers and got 5 to 10 years on each delivery, ran consecutive to one another, and served 25 years in a state penitentiary for $360 worth of heroin. And I heard this man tell this story, and afterwards I caught up to him in the hallway and I asked him if I could help him. And I'm currently working to commute the rest of his sentence. He has been on parole for 11 years and he's 76 years old. So at this point, this man has been in this system for 36 years, over $360 worth of heroin. And that to me is unimaginable. If that's not injustice, I don't know what is, but it sickens me. And it sickens me how long the process is to even try to commute so this man can finally be free for what should have been a nonviolent infraction that changed nothing. Someone else took his place on that position, I'm certain, the next day. That's the greatest injustice that I personally have dealt with and unfortunately still dealing with, because I'm still working to try to get this commuted so that this elderly man who is a noble man can finally put this behind him and live free.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for such thoughtful answers to that question. I'm going to open up. I only have time for probably 1 or 2 audience questions. If anybody does have a question, please raise your hand or just maybe go off mute and just, I see you there, John. I'll go to you right now. You popped up very quickly.
Okay. Yeah. You know, the district we live in has a lot of gentrification. Okay. So I assume there's a lot of cases in front of a magistrate in our district with a landlord and a tenant, and the landlord wants to raise the rent. Okay, so let's assume a little scenario here that there's a family in front of you, a mother and 2 children. Let's say the children are 12 and 10, and she has a part-time job. Let's say a part-time job. She is working, and this is the 3rd time she's been in front of you. Okay. So what issues are you going to explore? And let's say the landlord has raised the rent $200. Okay. So what kind of issues are you going to explore, and what's your awareness of the housing network and the supports and services out there to help a family in this kind of situation? And can we go through all four, or I don't know how much time we've got. If all four of you could answer that, that would be great. But I understand there's a limitation on time. It's 5:02.
I'll make sure they all get a chance to answer the question.
Okay, thank you.
I'm also retyping the question, at least my rendition, so that they can also see it. Rachel, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I can go first. So when my clients have their rent raised or they're brought before a magistrate over a non-payment of rent case, there's a couple different organizations we try to work with. URA has a Lawyer of the Day program where they can apply for housing experts. And those housing experts are connected to a variety of funding sources. They can help people pay back rent or future rent, or there's a lot of resources they could provide that my organization can't. So we connect them there. Depending on how far along and what type of landlord it is, we can refer them to neighborhood legal services. If it's something that we think can be mediated between them and the landlord, there's just mediation. There's probably a couple of other organizations that I can't think of right now, but I have their flyers on my office wall. I think just working with resources to keep people in their homes and connect them with people that can help them.
Thank you. Philip.
Sure. I'll just quickly add some, agree with the resources Rachel already brought up. You also have Action Housing, you have East End Cooperative Ministry local to the area. And then ultimately, John, you bring up a really good hypothetical, you bring up a really good question, but ultimately, as far as what you can do as a magistrate, right now, we're in a system that it's tough, because what you're really talking about is rent regulations, right? And that's not existent right now. And so that's something that needs to be addressed more on the legislature side, to be honest. Obviously, just like Rachel said, and I'm sure the rest of the candidates on this forum would agree, we want to try to help institute services, help, conduct a mediation or use mediation programming to try to figure out if there's a way to keep individuals in their home. But ultimately, a magisterial district judge wouldn't be able to impose, any type of like rent regulations just from the bench.
Thank you, Philip. Kate, do you want to give us a follow-up?
Oh, this is like a lot of my clients are dealing with issues like this, and they do get brought to the magistrate repeatedly by the same landlords, and it is sort of its own form of litigation harassment of itself, and a misuse of the system. And those are complicated cases. And like I said, they can lead to much more serious and more complicated cases way beyond the magistrate level in multiple court systems. And one of the problems is that these are people who are already stretched really thin and working out a lot of resources, and to have to go to another lawyer, another clinic, another resource, pay this old fine, get this old bill, give it to this person. All of those things people think are like no big deal, like you're the only person that's asking them to do something. But housing is a massive crisis, and my clients deal with it all the time. It's like we started this clinic so clients like that would not have to explain this trauma to 15 different providers and hope that one of them is going to help them. I mean, you get frustrated when you do that. And a lot of these agencies don't even have the resources to provide it. It's just a massive crisis. There's just a $100 million grant proposal, request for proposal in Pennsylvania for housing issues. But my clients, I mean, they're like in a terrible housing property, but they owe $2,000 from like 18 years ago. So they can't get into their next housing property. And these aren't things that magistrates can really fix, but it would be nice if they understood them and were aware of like referring people out, which is what a lot of people do. Like, we'll just refer them out and they can call this person, they can call this person. And magistrates can't do much more than that. I mean, they're limited in that way too. But understanding that it's not so easy is like, we told you to call them. Why didn't you just call them and get the house? Like, you're an idiot. That's not helpful.
Thank you, Kate. Casey.
Thanks. In the hypothetical, and it's really difficult to answer hypotheticals in light of the fact that we don't want to say how we would rule in a particular situation, but I believe that a landlord can't unilaterally increase the rent without the terms of the contract and lease agreement allowing for it. I agree that the magisterial office should do everything it can to provide the tenant with resources, with the opportunity to rectify the problem before being displaced from their home. I think it benefits everybody. I think it benefits landlords to keep people in their home as much as possible. And it surely benefits the community so that we have people who have roots in the community and ties to the community. And ideally, we would like all the landlords to be in the community and have a vested interest in upholding and participating in the community, keeping the property up so that it's not ran by entities who have no real connection to the community. I agree we're a little bit limited here on what we can do in light of the fact that some of this falls on the legislative body to rectify any rent control that they deem to be appropriate. With that said, I think it's important that we get a little bit creative and we do the very best that we can to at least afford people the opportunity to correct any problem and rectify it so that we're not displacing families, because it's very challenging to families, to children, and to the community as a whole. Once people are here, they're tied to a community, they're tied to a church, maybe Little League. I mean, to displace them's a real problem for everybody. And we should find ways and take the time necessary to give them the opportunity to rectify the problem. But we can't fix everything. And I don't want to paint the picture that if you put a robe on, you can fix all social ills, because you're not going to be able to, not me or anybody else.
Yeah, especially things that have contracts involved,
Exactly.
like a lease. Those are all very excellent answers. I want to acknowledge that it is a little past 7. I was hoping to get this finished by 7:15 at the latest. So I do have time for one more question, but these are going to be short 1 to 2 minute answers to whatever, if anybody else has another question for our candidates. And if you do, go ahead and unmute and just kind of speak up. If not, I'll let them close us out with some final statements and thoughts about their candidacy. Go ahead, Demetra.
Yeah, so, a lot of research shows, and I think Casey was talking about this, that, individual judge biases and like even just your mood can influence your decisions, like just getting less lenient as it gets close to lunchtime. So how do you make sure that not only just like, the bigger like racial biases, but also just like how you're feeling that day isn't influencing the decisions that you're making on a day-to-day basis?
Go ahead, Rachel, jump into that.
I think one way to stop the quick decisions, irritated judge getting towards lunchtime is to stagger hearing times. A lot of the times they schedule everyone for 8:30 or everyone for 1 p.m. And then as it gets closer to quitting time or closer to lunchtime, is a little more irritable, less understanding, that kind of thing. So I think staggering hearing time so that you know that you're going to give this case the time and attention it deserves from this time to this time. And if it goes over a little bit, that's okay. But we're not going to stack everybody at 8:30 and everyone at 1 p.m. We're going to give ourselves the time to think through things, to breathe, to be calm, to think through each person's case, give it the attention it deserves before moving on to the next one that is scheduled for a time. And if we structure our days that way, I think it is a lot less likely that judges are going to get irritated towards lunchtime or the end of the day, because they know what's on the schedule and they know they have adequate time to get to it.
Thank you, Rachel. Philip?
Thanks. So I think I agree with the scheduling. I also think in line with that, there's a lot we can do on accessibility of that court, of our magisterial district courts in general. I will say though, directly to answer the questions, what a magistrate judge, what we could do, right, to combat those biases that we are aware of, and some of them that we aren't even yet aware of, right? And the things that come up as we get more tired, or we've heard 4 cases in a row, or we're hungry. Those are, I think the best thing is just being cognizant of it and always continuing to work on yourself to recognize your blind spots, never feeling complacent with yourself, right? For me, it's always looking at how can I further identify the biases that I have, and when they come up, what triggers them, so that I can be aware of them. And like Casey mentioned earlier on in this forum, set that aside, because we can't allow that to come into play when we're making these tough decisions on these tough cases. And as far as accessibility goes, I agree with staggered scheduling. I also agree with making hours that are more conducive to a community population that accesses that court without attorneys a lot of the time in pro se litigation. And so I think we have to offer, right, a night court opportunity, 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. once a week, working with court administration to possibly do once a month, opportunity on a Saturday. Those are things that would help with scheduling and would help with overall the flow of these cases.
Thank you, Philip. Kate?
Hi. So much like when my client, I mean, it's a little different when you're a magistrate, but clients are mad at me all the time when they first meet me. It has nothing to do with me. My clients lead hard lives. People that come to the magistrate have hard lives, and they have to make hard decisions, and their mood that day probably has nothing to do with me. So I've already learned how to not think that my mood needs to be part of the conversation, but I've also seen a lot of judges, the ones that trained me to be a good public defender, who are now judges. I've seen them lose their temper and apologize. I think that's important. So we are all human, and even showing people in front of you that if you get sad or you say something, that you're human too, you make mistakes and you apologize and you show your deference to the people that you've harmed. So I think there's that. And then I also think it's important to hire somebody. I think it's important to hire somebody who doesn't look like you and who will keep you in check and who will say to you, you're starting to get out of control. You need to we're going to call off your cases, or not like call off your cases, but we need to take a break now, or we need to reschedule something. Like if you need to have somebody in check who's going to remind you when things are getting heated in a courtroom, that everybody can kind of walk away for a minute and come back. And it's not about the magistrate. And I've just seen magistrates make so much about them. If a client is having a meltdown in a courtroom, that everybody has to leave and it's all about them. So I guess I'm sort of thinking that's really not an answer. That doesn't happen all the time, but people need to be told when things are getting kind of heated before they get to that point. And magistrates get grumpy, but in your own office, you need to have people there that you trust to keep you accountable. In city court, it's a little different because you're just kind of with the staff that is there. You're subject to the computers there. You're subject to the courtrooms not working. You're subject to staff calling off, and all of that's kind of out of your control. And that's part of why city court is a complicated mess. But in your own courtrooms, I think it's important to hire people that don't look like you and hold you accountable to how you treat people and how your mood might look during the day.
Thank you, Kate. And Casey, you want to finish us off?
Yes, thanks. For me personally, I think it all comes down to self-awareness. I think Phil touched on it. It's imperative that I stay vigilant, not about what's going on around me, but about what's going on within me, and take the necessary steps to ensure that any bias I do have, and we don't like to acknowledge them because we're human and it causes us some discomfort, I think, to a bit. I personally, and I think every human being, based off of, childhood experiences, environments you're raised in, environments you were educated in, and so forth, has some bias that doesn't make us evil. It just is there, and we need to acknowledge it, because if we do not acknowledge it, then that's when it manifests itself. So for me, it's imperative that I stay self-aware of any bias that I may have based off of experience or being taught something that was inappropriate, that just to make certain that those biases don't manifest themselves in me making poor decisions. And I think one way to do that is to stay self-aware. Another way to do that is to constantly try to look at things through the perspectives of those in the courtroom, those involved. If it's a matter of being hungry, you can take a 5-minute break and go eat a Snickers if that's what works for you. Whatever you need to do. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. And that's the right thing to do. That's the just thing to do for the next litigants. I would appreciate you telling me I'll be back in 5 minutes. I need to eat something real quick so that I don't make poor decisions. Take 10, Your Honor. But I think more importantly, it's this constant awareness. And sometimes we think they're noble, and we're doing, the bias may be detrimental to somebody else and not even realize that by promoting one, we're being biased against another. So I think for me personally, it takes a constant vigilance and a constant look at who myself to make certain that any bias I may have is at least acknowledged and then doesn't manifest itself in a poor decision.
Awesome. Those are all excellent answers. And I guess we're ending here. So before we kind of end, there's a couple upcoming events that we have with the Abolitionist Law Center. The first is on May 10th. For anybody interested in joining Court Watch, we're having a Court Watch orientation at 6:30 p.m. So that basically would entail you going into your Magisterial District Judges courtroom and watching them do what they do best every day. You may be sitting in one of these, whoever we elect in their courtroom doing that. And again, that's the Court orientation at 6:30 p.m. on May 10th. And then also on May 13th, we're doing a informational panel on jury nullification with the ACLU. So a jury nullification is probably not spoken about too much, but if you want to learn more about that, again, that's going to be May 13th at 3 p.m. If you're interested in any of this, please reach out to us. I did post the email, which is admin@courtwatch.org, or reach out to us on Instagram at ALC Courtwatch. Find us there and you can just send us a message. Either way would work either. And then let me post it again. Thank you for that suggestion. And then finally, I just want to give the candidates a quick 1 minute to say their last piece before we, all go into dinner time. So if you guys can keep it short, again, 1 to 2 minutes. And I also post all the candidates' names as well as their websites that they've put hard effort into. So take it away, Rachel.
Me again. Okay. So I'm running because I love my clients, and I know that courtrooms are full of people that I would care about just as much if I had the opportunity to know them. It feels really good to be able to get positive outcomes and reduce harm to my individual clients, but it feels bad walking out of the room knowing that everybody else isn't going to be treated the same. Before I filed to run, it took me a really long time to decide to run for this. I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people about, you have limited time on this earth. Is it better for me to stay where I am and continue helping the people that I help? Or should I try to run for this and make a bigger impact? And what one person told me a couple weeks ago when I was canvassing was that the universe is going to put you wherever you need to be. And I really hope that's true. And if I'm lucky enough to make it through the primary and make it to November, I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm going to give it my best, and I'm going to care about everyone that comes in front of me just as much as I do my clients today.
Thank you, Rachel. Yep, get it, Philip.
Got it. Well, thank you, Chris and Walter and everybody else who made this forum possible. Thank you to the other candidates for participating and allowing these discussions to take place. We talked a lot about issues and how we see them currently in our district and then a larger scale as well. I think, what I'll focus on in my last bit here is just what we can do, right? How do we move forward? How do we achieve progress? That's where I've really spent a lot of time, and the biggest reason why I'm running is how I think I can positively impact the community through this court. And I've got a multifaceted approach to that deals with accessibility. It deals with making the Magisterial District Court a resource for the community. It deals with making the Magisterial District Court a fair, impartial, a court of high integrity that's not able to have even an appearance of corruption, as well as a criminal justice reform in how we make municipal court better, which is where we would be operating the criminal preliminary hearings out of right now. And that system is not, it's not enough. And it's failing the city right now, and it needs reworked. And I think all of us on this forum would agree with that. And so thank you for posting the website. My issues page there goes into the details, the nitty gritty of everything I just went over. And so feel free to go look there and read up a little bit. And I certainly hope the universe permits it and wants me to serve the community. I hope I have that opportunity. And I thank everybody for their attendance today.
Thank you, Philip. Kate?
Thanks. I've just always been committed to trying to help the most marginalized and underserved people in my community. It's how I was raised, and I'd like to continue doing it. And this is a new way to do it. I think that I am disrupting the way that representation is happening in this county on a small scale now, in terms of trying to provide holistic representation by understanding complex systems and trying to get to the bottom of what the real issues are. And so I'd like to be able to just take that to the courtroom. And like I said, the magistrate, the public defenders that train me are showing me what good judges are. And when I win in their courtrooms, I think everybody could win all the time if magistrates had backgrounds where they understood, because they've stood next to somebody on their worst day and they've represented them. They understand what that call is like at 12 in the morning the night before and at 12 at night the night after, because it's a lot of anxiety for people to have to even go through this. And if you haven't walked somebody through even these small things, traffic tickets are no big deal to magistrates and officers and huge deals to our clients. And I say ours because I'm talking about people on here that do that, but you have a full right to a trial there. So whether it's me or any of the magistrates on here, I encourage you to challenge your case. It's beyond a reasonable doubt, you versus the officers. So you might as well take your shot and shoot your story. So I'll just leave it at that.
Excellent. And finally, Casey.
I thank you too for this opportunity. We've been participating in these, and in my opinion, this may have been the best one that we've had. I like discussing the issues, and I think it's important for the voters and our community to hear the issues and hear our position on the issues. Like Rachel, I struggled to make a determination because I spent the last years advocating for my clients, and this rule is a little bit different. I'm no longer the advocate. I'm the impartial arbiter that sits up there and supposed to hear things and be impartial and make that determination. And I struggled to, do I really want to do that? And at the conclusion of it, yes. And the reason why is simple. I believe that I can contribute to this district in my community in this role, and nothing more. It's not ego, it's not money. It's merely, I possess the skills, I possess the experience and the qualifications to make a contribution, a significant contribution to this community in this way. And my vision for the court is just that, a court where everybody's heard, a court where everybody's fair, a community court, a court where people in the district view this court as theirs. I'm all for holding as many programs as we can, educational programs, so that the community come in and learn about the law, learn about their rights, learn about Miranda, learn about a whole variety of things. And not only are they being informed, but they're being made a part of this court. And I think that's important. I think the position is unbelievably important. And I think the voters should take their time, do their research, and realize that the next person is going to hold that position for 6 years. So it's really, really important who that person is. So I encourage the voter to do their research and to look and explore all of us. And at the conclusion, make the determination that you believe is best for the court.
Thank you, Casey. And thank you everyone for participating and taking the time out of your schedule to show up. And just so everybody knows, we will be posting this on our YouTube channel. So if anybody wanted to rewatch or share any of this, we should have that up in the next 24 to 48 hours to be viewed. And again, thank you so much for being here, and have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.